Whispers of the Unfaithful. The old Whitmore Manor stood at the edge of Black Hollow, its stone walls weathered by centuries of secrets. Generations had lived and died there, but no one stayed for long. Some said it was haunted by those who had suffered great betrayals. Others whispered that the house itself punished those who strayed from loyalty. When David and Claire Montgomery bought the manor, they dismissed the rumors. They were historians, fascinated by the property's rich past. It had once belonged to Edmund Whitmore, a wealthy merchant whose wife, Eleanor, had been infamous for her affair with a visiting nobleman in 1742. The scandal ended in blood. Edmund had slit his wife's throat and vanished without a trace. His body was never found. The couple moved in on a crisp October evening, eager to restore the manor and document its history. The first night was peaceful, but on the second, Claire woke to soft whispers in the darkness. She nudged David awake. "Did you hear that?" she murmured. David listened. The house was still. "Just the wind," he mumbled before rolling over. Claire, unconvinced, sat up and listened harder. The voices were hushed, urgent. They sounded intimate. She could almost make out words, as if lovers were murmuring in secret. The next day, while researching in the manor's study, she found something odd. A journal, bound in cracked leather, lay wedged behind an old bookshelf. She flipped it open and her breath caught. It belonged to Eleanor Whitmore. The entries detailed her affair, stolen moments in the candlelit halls, the scent of Edmund's cologne lingering even when he wasn't there, the way her lover whispered promises into her ear. But the last entry was disturbing. Edmund knows. He watches. He waits. That night, Claire woke again. The whispers had returned, clearer this time. She heard a woman giggling, then gasping in fear. Then a low, guttural voice. "Faithless. Liar. You will pay." A piercing scream rang through the house, echoing in her skull. David bolted upright. What the hell was that? Before she could answer, the bedroom door creaked open. Cold air rushed in, and in the dim moonlight, Claire saw them, figures, twisted in shadow. A man loomed at the center, his face gaunt, his eyes burning embers of hatred. Blood stained his hands. Edmund Whitmore. Claire clutched David's arm, unable to speak. The ghost's hollow voice rattled through the room. Adultery must be punished. The walls trembled. The bed frame rattled. From the hallway, the whispers grew louder, overlapping, becoming unbearable. David leaped from the bed, yanking Claire with him. They ran. Down the hall, past the portraits of the Whitmores, their painted eyes watching with eerie intent. The front door wouldn't budge. From behind them, footsteps. Heavy. Slow. Then the whisper came again, close to Claire's ear. "He knows." Pain lanced through her chest. She gasped, feeling warmth spreading across her nightgown. She looked down, blood. A deep, invisible gash had split her flesh, as if a phantom blade had sliced her open. David turned, his face a mask of terror. "Claire." The whispers became laughter, cold, triumphant. The last thing Claire saw before darkness claimed her was Edmund's face, twisted into a grin. The next morning, the townspeople found the manor silent. The doors wide open. The master bedroom drenched in blood. No sign of Claire or David Montgomery. Only the whisper of a man long dead. Adultery must be punished. Whispers of the Unfaithful, Part 2. The gruesome fate of Claire and David Montgomery spread quickly, but the legend of Whitmore Manor was far from over. The town sheriff, Thomas Grayson, had seen his share of strange cases, but this one unsettled him. Blood without bodies. A house steeped in whispers. The townsfolk begged him to leave it alone, but duty wouldn't allow that. Grayson's investigation led him to the archives, where he unearthed a chilling connection. In 1897, 2 officers had disappeared while investigating the manor. Their reports, found in an old file, mentioned hearing voices and seeing ghostly figures before vanishing without a trace. But the most disturbing link wasn't the officers. It was the train driver. The train driver's tale. In 1902, a man named Samuel Hargrove was the conductor of the Black Hollow Express, a train that passed dangerously close to the Whitmore property. He was an honest man, but his partner, Victor Langley, was not. Victor was a gambler, a drinker, and a cheat. He had a habit of charming women wherever he went, including Samuel's wife, Margaret. Samuel had trusted him once, until he found the love letters hidden in his wife's dresser. Margaret and Victor had planned to run away together, leaving him behind, humiliated and betrayed. But fate had other plans. One stormy night, as the Black Hollow Express chugged along its midnight route, Victor insisted on stopping at Whitmore Manor. He had a bet to settle. He swore the place was just an old ruin, nothing more. Samuel refused. "You don't mess with places like that," he warned. Victor sneered. Afraid of a few ghost stories? He pulled the brake, forcing the train to halt near the manor's entrance. He climbed out, lantern in hand, and taunted Samuel to follow. Samuel hesitated but stepped down onto the gravel. Rain pelted their coats as they approached the looming house. The front door creaked open. The air inside smelled of damp wood and something foul. Then came the whispers. Unfaithful. Deceiver. Betrayer. Samuel turned to leave. "We shouldn't be here." Victor only laughed. "Oh, come on. The big, bad ghost's gonna punish me." The door slammed shut behind them. The whispers grew louder, swirling around them like 1,000 unseen voices. Shadows moved in the corners. A figure stepped forward, a man in tattered 18th century clothing, his throat slit wide open. Victor staggered back. What the hell is that?" Samuel knew. "It's Edmund Whitmore." Edmund's ghost glided toward them, his voice a growl of rage. Betrayal must be answered. Victor screamed as the specter reached for him. Invisible hands grabbed his limbs, dragging him into the darkness. Samuel didn't wait. He bolted from the manor, running for the train, his heart pounding in his chest. As he climbed into the conductor's seat, he saw something moving near the tracks, 2 figures. Police uniforms from decades past, their faces pale, their eyes hollow. The lost officers. They stepped onto the tracks, blocking the train's path. Samuel had no choice. He gritted his teeth and pulled the throttle. The train roared forward. One officer lunged, trying to stop him, but the iron beast was unstoppable. There was a sickening thud as the body hit the ground. Samuel didn't dare look back. The next morning, search parties found Victor's body inside the manor. His limbs were contorted, his face frozen in horror. The tracks were slick with blood, but no officer's body was ever found. Samuel Hargrove vanished that night, never seen again. The curse continues. Years passed, but Whitmore Manor remained a place of death and betrayal. Some say Samuel's train still runs on foggy nights, its whistle echoing through the valley. Others claim the police officers wander the tracks, searching for justice. But one thing is certain, those who cheat, those who betray, and those who deceive will always meet the same fate. Because in Black Hollow, the past never stays buried. And Whitmore Manor never forgets. Whispers of the Unfaithful, Part 3. The legend of Whitmore Manor refused to die, its curse spreading like a shadow over Black Hollow. The missing officers. The doomed train driver. The lovers who vanished without a trace. Yet, some people never learn. The treasure hunter. In the summer of 1935, a man named Richard Gaines arrived in town. A ruthless opportunist, Richard made a living looting abandoned places, selling whatever valuables he found. When he heard rumors of Whitmore Manor, gold heirlooms, priceless antiques, he saw nothing but dollar signs. The townsfolk warned him. "You don't go looking for what's best left alone," said old Martha Evans, the innkeeper. "That house punishes the faithless." Richard smirked. "Lady, ghosts don't pay my bills." That night, under the cover of darkness, he made his way to the manor with a crowbar and a sack for his haul. The house loomed in the moonlight, its windows black as empty eyes. As he stepped inside, the air grew heavy, thick with something unseen. The whispers began. "Liar. Thief. Unfaithful." Richard shook his head. "Tricks and wind," he muttered. He pried open cabinets, stuffing anything valuable into his sack, silverware, a gold pocket watch, even an old dagger with an ivory handle. As he turned to leave, a sound froze him in place. Footsteps. Slow. Measured. Coming down the stairs. He spun around, his lantern shaking in his grip. A figure stood at the top of the staircase, a man with sunken eyes and a bloodied cravat, his fingers curled like claws. Edmund Whitmore. Richard stumbled backward, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The spirit's hollow voice echoed through the room. "The unfaithful must suffer." The house erupted in chaos. Doors slammed. The whispers grew deafening. The dagger in Richard's sack burned hot, searing his skin through the fabric. He ran. Through the hallway. Out the door. Into the woods. The night swallowed him whole. The crocodile's revenge. Richard didn't stop running until he reached the river on the outskirts of town. His heart pounded as he leaned against a fallen tree, gasping for air. "Stupid ghost tricks," he spat. "I got what I came for." A rustling sound made him freeze. The bushes nearby shifted. Then, a growl. Before he could react, a massive shape lunged from the water. Scaly skin. Gleaming yellow eyes. A crocodile, its powerful jaws snapping shut around Richard's leg. He screamed as the beast twisted, dragging him into the water. His sack of stolen treasures sank beneath the surface. He clawed at the mud, but it was useless. The crocodile spun violently, snapping bone, tearing flesh. The river turned red. But Richard wasn't allowed to die just yet. Something else waited for him on the shore. The lion's feast. Morning came, and the villagers found the torn remnants of Richard's clothes near the river. But there was no sign of his body. Not until days later, when a group of hunters stumbled upon a horrifying scene in the savannah. A pride of lions crouched in the tall grass, their golden fur stained dark with blood. Their meal lay in pieces, Richard Gaines, or what was left of him. His face frozen in an expression of sheer terror, his arms torn from their sockets. But the strangest part. A dagger with an ivory handle was wedged into his ribcage. The same dagger he had stolen from Whitmore Manor. The curse lives on. The people of Black Hollow whispered that Richard's fate was no accident. The house had cursed him. The spirits had guided him to his end. The crocodile, the lions, they were only instruments of Whitmore's revenge. Because in Black Hollow, betrayal is never forgotten. And death is never the end. Whispers of the Unfaithful, Part 4. Black Hollow had long been cursed by the sins of the past, but the townspeople still tried to live their lives, pretending they didn't hear the whispers at night or see the shadows that moved when no one was there. But history had a way of clawing its way back to the present. And justice, whether from the living or the dead, always found those who strayed. The train driver's fate. After the night Samuel Hargrove ran over the phantom police officer near Whitmore Manor, he didn't stop driving. He rode the Black Hollow Express deep into the night, the whistle wailing like a ghost scream through the valley. But his luck ran out by dawn. The police were waiting for him at the next station. Sheriff Thomas Grayson and his men boarded the train, guns drawn. "Hargrove," the sheriff called. "You're under arrest." Samuel's hands shook as he raised them. For what? For murder. They pulled him from the conductor's seat, dragged him onto the platform, and locked him in the back of their patrol wagon. He tried to explain, tried to tell them about the manor, the voices, the thing that had killed Victor Langley. But no one believed him. That was until night fell. The phantom jailhouse. Locked in his cell at the Black Hollow jailhouse, Samuel sat on the hard cot, staring at the ceiling, his mind racing. He wasn't alone. The whispers had followed him. Unfaithful. Betrayer. Liar. His breath hitched. I didn't cheat. I didn't betray anyone. The whispers turned to laughter. Then the cell door swung open. Samuel bolted upright. The entire jailhouse had gone silent. The flickering gas lanterns barely lit the empty hallway. The sheriff and his men were nowhere to be seen. But something else was. From the darkness, figures emerged. 2 policemen, wearing uniforms from another time. Their skin was gray, their eyes hollow pits of black. The same officers who had disappeared near Whitmore Manor in 1897. Samuel scrambled backward, pressing himself against the wall. No, no, you're dead. One of the officers pointed at him. His voice was a guttural rasp. You ran me over. Samuel shook his head violently. You weren't real. You weren't. The second officer reached through the cell bars and grabbed his throat. Cold, unnatural fingers squeezed the air from his lungs. Samuel kicked and struggled, but the grip tightened. His vision blurred. And then, he was somewhere else. Buried alive. When Samuel's eyes snapped open, he was no longer in the jailhouse. The musty air burned his nostrils. He reached out and his fingers scraped against wood. A coffin. Panic surged through him as he pounded against the lid. No. No. Let me out. The whispers returned, surrounding him in the darkness. Unfaithful. Betrayer. Liar. The coffin shook violently, as if unseen hands were dragging it across the ground. Samuel could feel it moving. Then suddenly, falling. The impact hit him like a train. Dirt rained down on the coffin lid, filling every crack, every crevice. He screamed, kicking, thrashing, but the soil piled higher, pressing down on him. Then, silence. The forgotten grave. Morning came, and Sheriff Grayson returned to the jailhouse to check on his prisoner. But when he unlocked the cell, it was empty. No sign of forced entry. No broken locks. Just gone. Days later, a group of men digging near the old train tracks found something horrifying, a coffin buried in the dirt, its lid clawed from the inside. Inside lay the rotting corpse of Samuel Hargrove, his mouth still open in a scream. No one could explain it. He had been locked in jail. But the town knew the truth. Whitmore Manor had claimed him, just like all the others. The curse spreads. The story should have ended there. But curses don't end. They only grow. Decades passed. The manor stood, its windows black and waiting. The train tracks rusted. The jailhouse burned to the ground under mysterious circumstances. But people kept disappearing. A reckless teenager who broke into the manor dared his friends to stay the night. They found his body the next morning, his throat slit wide open, just like Eleanor Whitmore's. A greedy lawyer who tried to buy the land vanished without a trace. His office was found soaked in blood, but no body was ever recovered. A fisherman at the river was dragged under by something unseen, his screams swallowed by the dark water. And on nights when the fog rolled in thick, travelers swore they could still hear the whistle of the Black Hollow Express, a train that had stopped running years ago. Some said it carried the lost souls of the betrayed, forever trapped between life and death. Others believed it was coming back for more. And if you listen closely, you can still hear the voices whispering in the night. Waiting. Watching. For the next one to fall. Whispers of the Unfaithful, the final part. Black Hollow had become a graveyard of secrets, a cursed town where betrayal was punished in the most horrific ways. The spirits of Whitmore Manor had made sure of that. But the curse wasn't done. It had one final act left to play. The gathering at Whitmore Manor. One stormy night, a group of townsfolk gathered at Whitmore Manor, determined to end the curse once and for all. Among them were Sheriff Thomas Grayson, old Martha Evans, and a few reckless men who believed burning the house down would break its hold on Black Hollow. "This place is evil," Grayson muttered, gripping his shotgun. "We should have done this years ago." Martha Evans, the town's oldest resident, shook her head. "You can't destroy what doesn't belong to the living." Lightning flashed, illuminating the decayed mansion. The doors creaked open as if inviting them inside. And then the whispers started. Unfaithful. Betrayers. Liars. The townsfolk hesitated. The storm raged around them. Then, the doors slammed shut behind them. They were trapped. The final hunt. The floorboards trembled beneath their feet. The walls pulsed, breathing like a living creature. And then, they weren't alone. Figures emerged from the shadows. The dead had come back. Samuel Hargrove, his face rotted and sunken, his eyes burning with rage. Richard Gaines, his body torn as if the lions had only just released him. The lost police officers, their hollow eyes locked on the sheriff. Eleanor Whitmore, her wedding dress soaked in blood. And at the center of them all, Edmund Whitmore. "Justice," he whispered, his voice echoing through the manor. "For the unfaithful." The walls collapsed around them, and suddenly, they were outside, but not in the safety of town. They were deep in the wilderness, far from civilization. Something howled in the darkness. The wolves' revenge. Sheriff Grayson spun, shotgun raised, but before he could fire, a blur of fur and teeth lunged at him. A wolf, massive and foaming at the mouth, sank its fangs into his throat. He screamed, blood pouring down his uniform, but more wolves emerged from the trees, their eyes glowing in the moonlight. One by one, they tore into him, dragging his mangled body into the woods. Martha Evans turned to run, but the ground split open beneath her. The snake pit. She tumbled into a deep pit of writhing snakes, their bodies slithering over each other like a moving sea. The moment she hit the ground, the creatures swarmed her, sinking their fangs into her flesh. She tried to scream, but her throat swelled shut from the venom. Within moments, she stopped moving. The final punishment. The last remaining townsfolk sprinted into the jungle, desperate to escape the nightmare. But the jungle was waiting for them. A man named Peter, a farmer who had helped organize the burning, gasped as something coiled around his legs. He looked down just in time to see a massive anaconda wrapping itself around his body. The snake squeezed. His ribs cracked. His eyes bulged as his body was crushed like a rag doll. The others weren't so lucky. One stumbled into a swamp, where the water erupted with crocodiles. They ripped him apart, his screams vanishing into the murky depths. Another made it to a clearing, only to be ambushed by a pride of lions. Their golden eyes locked onto him before they pounced, their claws raking through his flesh. His death was slow. The lions played with him before finally delivering the final bite. One by one, they all fell. The jungle, the animals, the spirits, they had all been waiting. Waiting for this moment. The manor stands forever. By dawn, nothing remained of the townsfolk. The jungle had swallowed their bodies, leaving no trace of the slaughter. Back in Black Hollow, no one dared to go looking for them. They knew. The whispers had stopped. The train whistle no longer echoed in the night. The curse had finally claimed what it was owed. But the manor still stood. Waiting. Watching. For the next fool who dared to betray. Because in Black Hollow, The unfaithful always pay. And the curse never dies.